Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelson, professional horse trainer. With me once again is my good friend, Deborah Merrow, certified Alexander Technique instructor. And if you thought you missed last week's episode, you didn't. We didn't get one done.
Sorry,
I think you've been really sick,
I've been
and
really sick. I've got it, my naturopath says. We don't want to call it anything but it from
it
Stephen King.
No, and I've had like even today, my eyes are still itchy and watery. I've had all of these allergy symptoms, and I have no known allergies. So I don't know what the heck is bothering my
It's
system.
the eclipse. I don't know.
Yeah. So we skipped a week, you guys, and we are
Sorry,
back on track, and life just happens. That's just
it
how it
did.
rolls. Um, so today's topic, we're going to try to at least introduce, if not tackle, the horse posture that you and I call basic balance,
Hmm.
which traditionally is a long frame. If we go to that term,
Yeah,
you would
using that terminology.
it would be a horse in a long frame, sort of a lengthened neck but not a low headset. So different than, say, the posture of extension where the neck is shortening and the head is either up in the air like the horse would drown in a rainstorm or curled backwards with the nose on the chest, right? That would be the posture of extension, which is called that because the spine is pushing downward, the back is dropping,
Right.
and that's technically called spinal extension. Um, and then we talked about the posture of long and low, which is not balance, but it's the opposite use of the body from the posture of extension. So if the
Hmm.
back has been dropping and the top line muscles have been shortening, long and low is not balanced. It's just a reverse of an opposing use of the muscles of the top line,
Yeah.
different use of the neck, and the back well, technically, I think when we looked over that research paper by Jean-Marie Denois, I think you pointed out that with the in the position or the posture of long and low, the spine is maybe beginning an upward trajectory. We're starting to get
Right.
some spinal flexion or lifting of the back, but it's minimal. So it's not a degree of lifting the back that we would call essential balance.
It reminds me of in the Alexander world what just being in your complete length. Everything's available. Nothing's tensed, nothing's shortened necessarily in the context of what most lay people think. It's just all open and available for anything.
It's like a letting go of
Oh, I like
chronic
that.
patterns of tension. That to me is what long and low is. It's a little bit like your exercise that you call constructive rest, where
Right,
you just lay on a hard floor with a
right.
book under your head and just allow the body to release tension. Just
Yeah,
let
mm-hmm.
let go of tension. And it's not an athletic posture. It's not a super
No.
functional posture, but it's sort of useful for the purposes of recovery.
Good point. Yeah. Recovery and noticing, just being aware. So yeah.
Yeah, so that to me is what long and low is for the horse. And it's, yes, there's too much weight on the forehand, but at least the spine is no longer actively going downward. And the sort of chronic tightness along the spine, through the neck, around the head, all of that is sort of just releasing releasing tension. It's not really working one way or the other. It's a
Right.
lack of work.
I guess what's important to me for people to understand is these are not places to stay. These are just the
Yeah,
progression
that there's nothing
to basic balance. This is just what we've seen in all of our years of how horses have achieved basic balance.
Yeah. And so a horse that's had a chronically dropped back and shortened all the muscles of the top line, that muscle
Mhm.
memory, that pattern in the nervous system is in there. So I look at long and low as a counterbalance throughout the body, um, for horses that have been working in that posture for a good long time, of which there are many. It's
Right.
not uncommon. And so I go long and low, I look at it as a counterbalance on the way to balance.
Right, because I've seen the extreme of long and low. I think I just saw it on Facebook. It was some sort of Western class, and you could see that even staying in long and low develops
New
this
problems.
new
Hmm.
problems.
Yeah.
So
It's not
we're
where
not
the,
saying we're going to stay there forever. This is just like rehab, this is just the place we found that we have to go
I think
as a
it's
big
also important to sort of, before we get into basic balance, which is my essential goal, that's the starting place of balance.
right,
There's, we can't say there's never a time where the posture of extension is not useful and
correct.
appropriate.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
the same for long and low. Neither
Right.
one is a long-term sustainable use of the body.
Not a
But
healthy use, that's for sure.
right. And so like a horse that's been chronically stuck in long and low, as we begin to move towards balance, that horse going into the posture of extension could be very beneficial and useful,
Short
right?
term, yeah.
Short term. Where a horse that's been working in the posture of extension, working a little bit in long and low, very beneficial, very useful, short term. And so it really starts to kind of take that weight off of people's shoulders that, oh my God, if I let my horse work in long and low, I'm going to destroy my horse. Or, oh my God, if my horse goes into extension, I'm somehow going to destroy my horse. I go, those are just different uses of the body that can be beneficial at certain times, depending,
Right.
because there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to a body.
Same with the human.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, any body.
Anybody.
Hmm. Anybody. So then, Western pleasure is a really good example
Mhm.
of what we used to see, or maybe if we go back to the origins of how Western pleasure became a competitive sport, if we think of a horse in a long and level frame, right? If
Mhm.
we think of a horse that where the neck is lengthening, but there's enough flexion of the spine, enough hindquarter engagement, enough
Mhm.
self-control over internal body weight that they're engaged and balanced to the point that it's beneficial to the body long term. And that sort of long and level posture is what we used to seek in Western pleasure,
You're right.
hunter, tra
Hunter, yep.
trail riding. It's a working ranch sort of posture,
Right.
right? It's just a balanced, easy posture. And to me, that's the posture I call basic balance, because if we don't have that as a starting point, then we can't go into collection or more
Mhm.
athletic agility. The horse won't develop more athletic agility
Right.
without at least the minimal coordination of basic balance, which is going to involve three important components. So on a mechanical level, basic balance means the alignment of the spine from skull to tail is in a healthy, stable, correct alignment, right? There's no excessive lateral bending side to side anywhere through the spine. It also means that the function of rotation or twisting that causes the horse's barrel to roll side to side or the pelvis to tilt side to side, that function has also been stabilized with the dorsal spinous processes remaining upright, even during turns and circles and lateral work.
Bingo. Dun, dun, dun,
Ding, ding,
dun. Most
ding.
important phrase.
Right, right. And if we don't know what that means, it would be worth an effort to find out.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think in some worlds they call that like maybe it would make sense, like dropping the shoulder or that kind of language. I hear people say, "Oh, when I turn left, he drops a shoulder." Well, that's really
what
a
that really
rotation.
means is not only is it a rotation, but you've lost the ideal alignment of the spine. Because what keeps the shoulders upright is it's particularly influenced by the alignment of the lower cervical spine to the upper thoracic spine through the horse.
Right.
So, in other words, if the neck is overbent, you're losing the alignment of the lower neck to the upper back. You're going to have a shoulder dropping,
Something's gonna
popping,
pop out.
escaping. Yeah, you're going to have a shoulder issue.
Shoulder's gonna pop out or shoulder's gonna fall. Whatever
Yeah,
language you makes sense to you, that's when we don't have alignment.
yeah. And even the
The
whole idea
basics.
of like freeing up the shoulders, I go,
Hmm.
you can only free the shoulders when the weight load is alleviated. So if a horse is in the posture of extension or the posture of long and low, that horse is not yet resisting internal body weight
Right. It
from
can't.
falling
It,
to the front limbs.
yeah.
And so you can't free the shoulders as long
No,
as the
it's
front legs
impossible.
are, it's impossible. It'd
Yeah.
be like us doing a handstand and say, free your shoulders, right? Or
Yeah, and
crawling
that's a
and
good point
saying,
because I see a lot of shoulder problems in people that do yoga and a lot of downward dog.
interesting, because
Yeah,
it's supposed to fix shoulder problems.
but if we're going into it with bad use
Oh,
already,
ding, ding, ding.
ding, ding, ding.
Depends on how you do it.
It depends. Yeah,
It
it depends from
depends.
the great teachers of all times. It
Yes.
depends. But I do because people, and this goes into pretty much everything, is they want to do it and not think about how they're doing it.
Yeah, that is a whole nother podcast.
That's
Maybe
like
next time is
the
the task does not create balance as a side effect.
good point.
It might and it might not. Yeah.
I think it goes back to that time when I thought I was able to go back into competition and you threw a ground pole out in front of me and I completely fell apart.
Yeah,
It
the thought of balance went out the window because
went out the
the
window. I
task
was
of
like,
the ground pole
ah.
became the main focus.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's a
Yeah.
whole nother podcast, like you
That
said.
is. We'll do that next time. But to continue on with basic balance, it's like, yes, it sort of results in a frame, in a posture that's somewhere near it. There's a lengthening of the neck and the top line muscles for sure, right? There's an elevation of the pole to at least the level of the back or the withers, but it's not just the neck coming up.
I think that's
It's
so important.
actually, it's when the horse can elevate their own head and neck instead of using reins to lift the head and neck,
Right.
it's because when the horse has a minimal amount of upward spinal flexion and a minimal degree of hindquarter engagement and stability, that's what allows the horse to not only push forward from the hind legs, but also control or manage or stabilize or whatever word we want to use, but essentially resist their own body weight from overloading their own front legs. That takes back muscles, hindquarter muscles. It takes an upward direction of the spine and a forward rotation of the pelvis to a minimal degree. That's why we call it a long frame, but it's a balanced frame,
Right.
right? And
So
to
is there any way we can describe what that looks like?
Well, it looks long and level, but
Okay.
more importantly, because bodies are so complex, if we're only going by the visual element, we could also have a
Hmm.
horse in what I would call a sneaky version of extension that also looks
Yeah,
long and level.
I agree. I know. I see that with my horses.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the main way we know the difference is basically the posture of basic balance is the result of a stable, healthy alignment of the entire spine, reducing lateral bending or excessive mobility,
Hmm.
upright rotation, a little bit of flexion, and a little bit of hindquarter engagement. And what that allows the horse to do is the horse can easily follow the rider's seat for steering
Oh,
because
that's
of
a
the
good one.
left-right balance. So we're no longer
Good one.
dependent on the reins for steering. The horse starts to balance sort of self-propelled forward with self-controlled forward. So in other words, whoa and go become equally easy.
They're easy.
They're easy.
They're
So,
easy. There's not this abruptness of it all. It's just a flow.
or an extreme. So if we're starting to work in the land of half halts or half pushes, but we still need the reins for brakes because our horse can't control its own speed too fast or too slow, then we can't refine that impulsion to, like, to me, a half halt is a smaller version of the same skills required for halt. It's
Right. I
like,
agree.
duh, it's not mysterious. It's like, okay, we have brakes in our car, and if we use that, we can use the brakes a little or a lot, right?
Mm.
But when we sort of have to resort into a leveraged bit and pulling on the reins in order to slow a horse down or rate the speed or stop, that's like going to the emergency brake rather than the brake pedal, right? So I go, if we're using the emergency brake, it's very hard to use a half emergency brake.
Ge-
That, it's like that's kind of tricky. So to me, basic balance is really recognized a little bit through what we see visually in the frame or the posture, but more importantly, what we feel in ease of motion. Because a horse that's no longer too heavy on the front legs, as they learn to sort of equalize whoa and go, and the steering gets easier because the spine is more stable in alignment, rotation, and a little bit of flexion, it's like the path of travel is easy. We think where we want to
Everything. Yeah.
go, the horse goes there. Upward and downward transitions are equal and easy, right? And the horse has a steady rhythm within each gait that we're not having to either create or hold back. Like we're not pushing forward or holding the horse back. And because the weight is no longer on the front end, that neck is elevating because the front legs are becoming lighter. So it's really from the sternum, the upper back, the front of the thorax, the front legs, and the neck are all coming upward,
And you
right?
can't force that.
You can't force that. You can
You
develop
can't do
it,
it. Yeah.
but the
But it would.
result is
Yeah.
agility and athletic ability and lightness. So I go, if our horse isn't easy to steer, if whoa doesn't equal go, then we don't have basic balance.
Good
I go,
point.
that to me is the minimal requirement of how a horse can safely carry a rider, safely do what we want to do. And I mean safely in their mind and body. Instead of going lame from our work or being stressed or have wear and tear or have bad behavior and defensiveness, it's like that posture of basic balance is a cohesion of the mind and the body into a minimal degree of mechanical efficiency, correct mechanical function.
And what
And
I see in horses that are just kind of finding it themselves is they start to become curious and seek it.
yeah, they concentrate on it.
They do. They're like, "Where's," and I've seen people do
Yeah.
that with the Alexander work. Once they start to develop a little bit of the feel and timing of it all, they try to find it. They're looking, "Where is that? Because that's what I wanna feel like."
Yeah, and you know, it's so interesting because in the steps, when I work with clients, those steps where the horse finds basic balance and the rider finds basic balance, and we're more talking
Mhm.
about the horse today, but when the horse has that sort of like everything comes together and
Yeah.
we get a stride or two of basic balance after a lot of work, everybody recognizes it. And it's so interesting because I'll ask people to describe the feeling of it. And there's a lot of synonyms in there, but it
Yep.
usually involves floating, gliding, ease, drift. I can't think of any other words right offhand, but you get the idea. There's
Yeah.
that
It's hard
ease
to
of motion.
describe, like, mechanically what happens because it's not like that.
Exactly. So when the mechanics come together, it's like you just got out of the old truck and you got into the brand new sports car.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's still essentially functioning, but one, when the functionality is imbalanced or compromised or not yet coordinated into basic balance, then it feels like a bumpy ride. It feels like we don't have
I think
power
that is
steering.
such a good point because I you hear it all the time. "Oh, I can't sit his trot. His trot's
He
terrible."
has a
Well,
terrible trot.
then
Yeah.
you probably don't have basic balance.
Yeah, to me, when people say this horse has a terrible trot, in my mind, I go, your horse has an unbalanced trot. There's a
There you go. I
balance
like that
issue,
better.
right? Or my horse
Yeah.
has an awful canter. I go, that's an unbalanced canter. And
Mhm.
it's really important because we label that like we label behavior
Yeah.
problems as a personality flaw within the horse.
Right.
He's lazy, he's stupid, he's crazy, he's ADD, right? And
Uh,
and then we do the same with movement. We go, "Oh, that my horse has such a bad trot. It's either a big trot I can't sit, or it's
right.
a bumpy trot that I don't like." And we think it's related to conformation, which again sounds unchangeable. And I go,
Right.
but when we have a hard time steering, or we have a walk, trot, or canter that feels really hard to ride, right? Just like it kind of bounces us all over the place or
Yep.
causes us to struggle with our stability. I go, that's what's telling us we don't have the coordination of basic balance. And I go, anybody, even with conformational challenges or injuries or whatever, I go, coordination is different. It's not dependent on exact conformation or personality,
Exactly.
right? So I go, if if somebody's learning to ride a bike or swim or drive a car, all kinds of people with all kinds of genetic
Right.
challenges or conformational shapes. It's like, yeah, we can still learn how to do that coordination, right? And maybe we need a little extra adjustment, but I go, it's still the essential coordination of riding a bike or swimming or driving a car is a learnable coordination for all humans, no matter their
Right.
personality or no matter their conformation. And it's the same with a horse learning to carry a rider. That is a learned coordination for every horse. It's not a given. We think because they're big, we just sit on them, and if we're not falling over, we're good to go. And I go, but then we complain about having no brakes, a sticky gas pedal, no power steering, right? Or a bumpy trot, or no terrible canter, or
I
we
can't
have a,
turn to the left
I can only get a right lead, but not a left lead, or vice
Yep, all of
versa.
that.
Yeah. All of those things are really indicating to us that we do not have the essential. and I call it essential
Hmm.
coordination for our horse's well-being and health, that essential coordination of basic balance. There's an
Right.
ingredient in there that's missing, right? And we might bounce between the posture of extension, the posture of long and low, and basic balance lives in the middle, right? It lives in the middle between those two postures. It's not one or the other, and it's not really a third thing, although it is a third thing. It's really kind of balancing like all the benefits of extension with all the benefits of long and low, and doing away with the negative side effects of long and low and the negative side effects of the posture of extension. And we're finding that middle ground where the horse is straight, level, like the midline is level, which means there's no
I
more
think that's
excessive
important.
weight on the front end.
Yeah, the
And
midline is level.
and everybody recognizes it when we get it. But knowing how to get it, I go, well,
Yeah.
that's what I'm working on. I go, 4 workbooks, I'm working on the textbook just on gaining the learning frame of mind and the posture or the coordination of basic balance because we don't see it very often in our horse world anymore.
No, we don't. And I don't know if people um know how to get there.
Yeah, because we think we need aids or tools
Right.
or tasks. But
Right.
it's same with Alexander technique. It's like people think they can only feel better if someone comes and adjusts the body rather than
Right.
developing a conscious awareness of movement.
Right. And yeah, there's a whole that whole thought of another podcast of right and wrong, do this, do that. That doesn't really exist in the Alexander world because we all innately have the ability, just like the horse.
Hmm. It's in there
It's all
somewhere.
there. It's all available. We just maybe have to peel back some layers to find it. And we may have to come through a side door or the back door, or we don't know, 'cause we can say, like in the Alexander community, start with the head neck relationship. Well, that doesn't work for all people.
Yeah,
We may have to look somewhere else to get in the door.
yeah. No, and to me, the coordination of basic balance when I'm developing it with a horse or helping a rider, it feels like walking on a balance beam. It's
Mm,
very precise. So if we think of walking on a balance beam as a human walking on a balance beam or a tightrope, we all have that ability somewhere inside of us, the
right.
capacity to be able to do that as a skill of coordination, right? It might be
Hmm.
easier for some bodies and harder for other bodies, but
Right.
with enough coaching or guidance or just time to allow discovery, we could
Hmm.
kind of figure it out, right? We could learn to do that. And that's
Yes.
how I look at the posture of basic balance for every horse. And it's like the closer I get to basic balance when I'm working with that with a horse, it feels to me like that very delicate adjustment, like walking on a balance beam.
Yeah.
It's and when it sort of all comes together, it's like being able to do something on a balance beam, like jump up and down, or when you watch a gymnast on a balance beam, it's like how are they like doing handstands and backflips and somersaults and jumping up and down on the balance beam, right?
Right.
That takes a lot of agility and athletic ability. And I go, that's where basic balance takes us into the higher degrees of balance or collection or whatever we need for our sport. But basic balance is just learning to stay up on the balance beam,
Right.
which is more than walking on a sidewalk. Both are balance, right? But
Correct.
if we walk on a sidewalk, it's a whole lot easier. We can do it and be completely dysfunctional and not even notice,
Yeah, we can.
right? But if we try to walk on a balance beam, every little habit that we have that's out of balance, away from balance, one-sidedness, right?
Mm.
Being too far forward or too far back or too far left or too far right. We didn't notice that when we're walking down the street on a sidewalk, but we're sure going to notice that when we get on the balance beam.
I think that brings up for me that the difference of the sidewalk and the balance beam is when you get on to something like the balance beam, it's internal focus. I mean, it
Oh, yeah.
takes you to the core, and and that's like taking a horse from who's acting like deer in the headlights. What's that? What's that? What's that? And then they finally start figuring out getting on the balance beam, and they're like, "Oh,
This
well,
takes
this is
some
kind of cool,
concentration.
and I need to focus on it." So all of that external stuff doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
That's what I see.
don't have to
None of that's an
desensitize.
issue because
No.
once they're moving and they really start, it gets juicy and they really start to feel what basic balance feels like
Yeah.
in the central nervous system, they want more.
Yeah, because the whole reason balance is the goal of training for me is because it feels so good.
It
I
does, and it's the
go,
same for people. You know, they're like
exactly.
and I get the same language, "Oh, that feels the flows there," or, "That's so much easier if I do it that way than if I do it my old way," that kinda language. So the horse,
Yeah.
I think, goes through the same thing.
Well, what feels good to us also feels good to our horse. That's
Yeah.
very, very important because when we're riding and we're getting sore and exhausted and using a lot of effort and using a lot of strength, that doesn't feel the things that we might normalize it because of our
Oh,
complex
that's
human
true.
brain. But if we pause and go, how am I feeling about this? Or how does this feel to me? That's going to be true for the horse too. If it
Yeah.
doesn't feel good to us, it's not going to feel good to the horse. And balance that people describe as wonderful, floating, hovercraft,
Mhm.
dreamlike, easy, right? All of those feelings that we would say are good feelings, the horse is also experiencing those same good feelings. So working on balance is a self-rewarding process. And
Mhm.
I will sometimes, like after I've been maybe riding one of my horses a long time and giving a lot of guidance, and I feel we've made some improvements, I'll throw them on the lunge line and kind of go, what do you choose to do now with
Ah, I like
yourself?
that option.
Right. And it's so interesting because, like, one of my horses, we've been rehabbing through navicular and ring bone and working really hard. And I threw him on the lunge line just to go, so what have you learned? Right.
What can you
And
do
what can you do
without
with
me?
yourself
Yeah,
without me
just gonna
participating?
hang out and watch.
What can you do with your body these days? And that horse, it blew me away. Even though I know it and I expect it's going to happen, it
Mm.
still blows me away every single time to watch him like concentrate, number one, really all business, I call it, right? He's
Oh, I
just
love that.
concentrating, very
That's what
calm.
mine do now, all business, just like, "Let's get to that."
Yeah. And he adjusted the size of the circle on the lunge line. He put himself in trot and then back to walk. And then he played a little bit with sort of tipping his nose to the outside, tipping his nose to the inside. He played with different speeds and transitions, and he found his own way into better and better movement when I spent that session on the lunge line. And I
Wow.
go, that you will never achieve ever, ever, ever through obedience and aids. And it's like, no, the horse does not learn balance through the aids or through obedience or through compliance. It is an internal discovery for the individual, whether it's a horse or a human.
I like that, the internal discovery, that is key, and I
Mhm.
think you and I, with the work we do, set that up for success.
Yeah,
when
the guidance is let's try this direction. Oops, that
let's
didn't work.
try.
Let's try that direction. Because
Right.
everything that when we say it depends, to me, it depends on what am I saying when I say it depends? It depends on number one, any aid we give, the horse could respond by saying, yes, I'll willingly cooperate, or no way, not going to do that. We can't
Mm-hmm.
control the response the horse offers.
Good point.
So I go, it depends, number one, on any strategy we use. It depends on how the horse responds. And then we go from there. We might have to make an adjustment, right? It also depends on how we respond to whatever our horse throws at
Mm,
us, right? Or it also depends on how we and our horse respond to the unpredictable context of the real world today,
right.
including, weather, temperature, location, what the neighbors are doing, the footing, the like everything, right? And so there's so many complex factors. All we can end up saying is, do I do this? Do I do that? It depends. It
I think
depends.
it's, yeah, just asking questions instead of expecting certain answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we definitely will have to do a podcast on the whole task oriented thing
Oh,
because
oh.
I, I go, it's balance is different than tasks. To
Good
me,
point.
once we achieve the coordination of basic balance, all tasks feel easier.
Good
Let me
point.
let me say that again. That's the whole reason I do what I do and what you do, why you do what
Exactly.
you do,
Why we
right?
do what we do.
So anything we have to get done in life or what we do is always easier because we're more efficient in balance. We're more resilient in
Right.
balance. We're more cohesive in mind and body, or cohesively working with our horse when we're thinking internally about balance. And that just makes the what's that we need to do always less stressful, easier.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean we don't get upset. It doesn't mean bad things don't happen. It means
Right.
that we can bounce back easier. We can cope with it without really falling apart.
Right.
We can manage all the ups and downs that life throws at us, or while we're trying to do what we want to do, we can deal with the things we don't really like along the way. It doesn't have to define who our horse is, or it
I
doesn't have
think
to
it, yeah,
define what we do.
it goes back to that turning inward,
Yeah.
seeking that inside, whatever that is, manifestation of ourselves instead of it being an outward thing. It's definitely an
Yeah.
internal
Because it's a
balance. It's an
coordination.
internal straightness. It's internal straightness and
Hmm.
balance.
Yeah. And that
Yeah,
internal coordination is possible for all bodies, just like
exactly.
learning to swim is a possible coordination for all bodies, right? Not all of us are born knowing how to swim. Some people have a talent for swimming. Some people have the perfect conformation to be an elite swimmer, right? Some people
Damn those
don't.
tall, skinny
But
dressage riders.
right? So we can all find the coordination. So to me, the posture of basic balance is more than just that long level frame. It's the feeling of a
Hmm.
coordination that gives us ease of steering, ease of speed adjustment, athletic agility, and a smooth ride, no matter what we're doing, because the horse has found this coordination where they're not overloading their front legs. They're
Right.
using their back and hindquarters as the source of stability during motion.
Does
That's
this
what,
make sense? What it feels like to me, this might not make sense. Like it's like a constant half halt in the horse's body.
well, if you
You can
think
kind of
of
feel the
rhythm,
energy come up but not fall forward.
So rhythm, just like music, what makes music nice for us to hear is that the rhythm is consistent
Yeah.
or it's inconsistent within a pattern.
Oh,
But
I like that.
right, so rhythm is a pattern, right? And movement is a pattern. So impulsion to me, I define it as equal parts impulsion in a horse, I guess a person you could say, but equal parts self-propelled, equal parts self-controlled. So what you're sort of saying, like to me, a rhythm is the energy of going forward with the resistance of not going forward too fast.
Yeah, that.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
and
it's so cool because you think, oh, they're going to dump forward, and then they all of a sudden find this inner resistance, whatever you want to
yeah,
call it. And it's like, oh, well,
stability,
that was cool.
resistance. Hmm. So
Without
that,
hands, I'm talking without rain contact. That it's
yes.
just inner generated.
Well, it's the horses. So technically, self-propelled is related to what we technically call the pushing capacity of the horse,
Hmm.
right? Or the accelerator. And the self-controlled part of it is related to what we technically call the braking um, use of the body, which is going to give you resistance, it's going to give you stability, it's going to give you kind of a governor over the
Hmm.
speed, right? So between braking and pushing, the physical structures, the biomechanics, the brakes and the accelerator are a system. How do I say this? They live in the back and the hindquarters. They don't live in the front end.
Oh, good point.
So the structures, including all the bone and hard tissues, soft tissues, the brakes and the accelerator are built into the horse's back and hindquarter.
I like that.
It's not in the shoulders, neck, and head, right? So that's why having to slow a horse or stop a horse from the bit on the front end is like pulling the emergency brake because the regular brakes aren't
Hmm.
functioning. They're not working.
Good
So can
point.
you imagine trying to drive your car with no brakes, but you can use the emergency brake? I go, wherever you want to go is going to be bumpy and awkward and inefficient at best, right? And the same thing, if we don't have an accelerator, right? We're trying to kind of do like the Flintstone car. We're trying to give more leg, thinking we're going to propel the car. And I go,
Nah.
we have to fix the accelerator. Then the car, our leg aid is really just tapping the gas pedal, right? And the way we use our core and our torso is how we pump the brakes. And really, the reins and the bit have very little to do with it. And if we have a horse in basic balance, we also get sort of rack and pinion steering, or we get like sports cars.
We do.
Yeah. So we steer from the saddle. We don't even steer from the
I think that's
reins.
the key point. It's all our spine and their spine talking to each other.
Yeah. And the T junction of our skull spine pelvis meeting their skull spine pelvis is
Yeah.
right there in the saddle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
That's where we feel
it's so
everything.
fluid when it happens. It's just such a great feeling.
It's the whole reason I ride.
It's so I know I
I
maybe
go,
get,
I
oh,
love that
I
feeling.
just got two strides. Oh, that was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, for the horse, because it's a learned coordination. Horses are big and powerful, and they can tote us around for years with zero guidance, training, or skill development
Hmm.
or
Plus
developing this
their
coordination because they're
heart.
big, right? But it's going to take its toll. It's going to feel unsafe to some horses, uncomfortable to other horses. It's going to cause breakdown in the mechanics and unnecessary wear and tear. right? So just getting on a
Hmm.
horse and staying on without us falling off or the horse falling over, I go, that's a pretty minimal requirement of balance.
Hmm.
But those same skills refined are basic balance, which would be the difference between we need enough balance to not fall over on a sidewalk, but we
Right.
need a greater degree or a refinement of that coordination to not fall off the balance beam. But as we're learning to walk the balance beam, just like horses, I go, we don't do it perfectly. Sometimes we need a person on the side. We put big, fluffy things underneath us because we're going to fall,
Hmm.
right? We're going to fall off the balance beam in the process of learning. And that's why that coordination of basic balance is developed. The horse gets it a stride or two, loses it, gets it, loses it, gets it, loses it, right? Until they learn not only the coordination, but also develop the muscular strength to stay on that balance beam.
Right. Yeah, and it's really rewiring the neurotransmitters. People don't realize, it's kind of like what happens in PT.
Hmm.
It's we're rewiring things to get better movement, and it takes time.
Yeah, because what we often call muscle memory is really packets of information that move through the
Hmm.
nervous system that develop habits as a way for the body to efficiently get through life, whether it's a good
Just to
habit or a
exist.
bad
Right.
habit.
Right.
It's the habit we form to get things done. And when we start to look at balance, what we're really doing is sort of looking at those habits as part of the operating system of the body,
Hmm.
right? So we're taking apart the computer and looking at the operating system as opposed to what we're doing with it, like jumping or dressage tests or trail rides or
Right.
Western or working cows. Those are all software programs,
Right.
right? That's what we do. Those are the tasks. That's the software we run. But if the operating system is inefficient, outdated, not balanced, right? All of that, no matter how much money you spend on software, it doesn't necessarily fix
Right.
your operating system.
The software of what, gadgets
Yeah,
and
so
putting and
the apps and the software are what we do, but the operating system, right? What updated phone we get, what new computer we get. We're updating the operating system, and each evolution that we're buying in our tech and devices is a more and more efficient operating system that can do more and more, can run
right.
more software, has more memory, is faster, speedier, easier to use. I go, so that to me is like, I go, okay, the posture of extension we can look at like a beta test, and the posture of long and low is like, okay, this is our version 1 and 1.10 and maybe up to version 3, but we haven't really fleshed out the bugs. We haven't
Right.
worked through the bugs, and we don't really have a good operating system until we're working in the posture or the coordination, I prefer to say, of basic balance.
Right.
That's where things get efficient and streamlined. So it's kind of a different concept. Basic balance is literally sort of a term, a postural description that I just
Hmm.
came up with because it didn't exist, other than saying the closest thing that exists currently is what we call a long but balanced frame.
Hmm.
And again, that long and balanced frame and ease of movement gives us a better trail ride, right?
It's availability. Yeah, you can do things.
Takes us cross country, right?
Yeah.
Helps us move the herd of cattle, right? Helps us go over easy fences in a pattern with kind of rhythm and control. So all of those resulting achievements are better, are sort of more fun, less stressful for both the horse and rider,
Well, they set you up for success in
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
whatever direction you want to go.
Or like you always love to talk about, like especially as we age and we're still carrying buckets of water and mucking
Hmm.
stalls and loading bags of feed and moving hay.
Hmm.
It's like if we don't really sort of take care of the operating system and keep
Hmm.
updating it, keep it efficient, keep it running smoothly, that wear and tear from little glitchy problems
Hmm.
means we can't do that anymore. We're not physically
Well,
capable at a certain point, right?
that's a
Because
scary for the horse person, isn't it?
it is,
It's very scary.
right? So those very same tasks, if we're using, if our operating system or our coordination is good, those tasks we do instead of going to the gym. That's our
Right.
workout program. That's our physical fitness,
Exactly.
right? But if we're doing it mindlessly and we're just reinforcing habits, overusing certain joints, underusing others, overusing certain muscles, underusing others, then we're going to keep slowly kind of creating wear and tear.
Hmm.
That means that system is going to quit functioning. It's just not going to be able to do that job because of the wear
Right.
and tear. And it's not the job itself that guarantees we become
Hmm.
stronger or weaker. It's how
Exactly.
we operate within that job that either renews us or sort of breaks things down.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. And I that's what why you and I even started this podcast.
I know, right?
It's what we have in common between training for optimal balance and what you call optimal posture based on
Hmm.
Alexander technique.
Yes.
Because if we're not striving to get to that optimal balance or optimal posture, then we're probably not going to just figure it out. Like it's something that requires some attention, some
Attention.
focus,
Hmm.
some mindfulness, some awareness, both for
Yes.
us and our horse. But the benefits are we last longer and we get to do more.
Yep. I
Yeah.
agree.
So I guess we'll wrap it up there. I think that's a good first podcast. You guys can comment or ask questions, and I'm happy to revisit the posture of basic balance to kind of flesh it out more or define it better. But I think you have a basic balance posture, so to speak, for people in optimal posture.
Yes.
And I have one for riders on horses or in carts, even driving, and for the horse itself. And I think for the horse itself is where our traditional training really falls short
Agreed.
on developing balance in the horse. All right.
Across the spectrum, not just one.
Yeah.
situ- It's across the whole horse world.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Hmm.
So we're not alone. No judgy judge. It's like we're all in this together, trying to do better by our horses the more we learn. That's the
And
best we can
ourselves.
do. And ourselves. Absolutely. Because wouldn't it be nice if our very expensive horse with thousands of dollars in training and feed and care and housing lasted a little longer rather than having to be retired at 12 or 13, that we could still enjoy working with our horse like I do with my 30-year-old
Like,
horse.
yeah, mine are 22 and 24, so
Yeah. All
and
right,
no
guys.
major hiccups body-wise.
Yeah. Amazing. It saves you a boatload on vet bills and
Yeah,
medication
it
too.
does.
Yeah. Boatload. All right, you guys, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the new subscribers. And I'm like super excited that I know it's minuscule by YouTube standards, but we hit 300 subscribers to the
Woo!
YouTube channel. And I got really excited about that.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, same with the podcast platforms. It's just sort of been steadily increasing. And like I said, I always feel like you and I have these conversations put a message in a bottle and throw it into the ocean. And so it's always really nice when we get some feedback or questions or we
It
see the
is.
numbers go up, because what's important to us, we hope is helpful to other people.
Hmm.
We hope it serves you and your horse. That's like
Yes.
our biggest intention. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Horse Geeks podcast.
Thanks,
Thank,
everybody.
thanks, everybody.